Hey everyone, Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. A lot happened last Friday with Aaron Rodgers visiting the Steelers, but nothing came of it as far as a deal. What does that mean for the Steelers quarterback plans? I break that down and do Mock Draft Monday here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. It's going to be a fun episode. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. More on them later. All right, Steelers fans, hope you had a great weekend. We got a lot to talk about here. We'll talk about this situation that happened on Friday. We'll also get to some of my breakdowns on this rookie quarterback class and where the Steelers should be looking at here. But we got to talk about what went down last Friday because I recorded that episode late Thursday going into Friday. Actually, it's a little bit technically on Friday morning, and put that out Friday morning. But then shortly after that, like in the late morning hours of Friday, Jerry Dulac, my colleague at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, broke the news to the world that Aaron Rodgers was actually at the Steelers facility last Friday, and it seemed to many at first that this could have been the final straw with him signing the deal with the Steelers, ending the saga, and ending the question of where he's going to be in free agency. But then shortly after that gets out, we saw a lot of reports come in that that wouldn't be the case and that he, in fact, this was more of a precursory visit with the team. Rodgers came, met with the Steelers brass for about 6 hours, then left with no deal. So you're probably sitting here wondering, well, wait, did that mean anything? What was the point of all this? Well, there could be many takeaways, but I'll give you mine. I think the biggest thing that I see here is that the Steelers, despite how people say, oh, they're desperate, they really want Aaron Rodgers. If they were desperate to sign Aaron Rodgers and he's flirting supposedly with the Giants and the Vikings might still be in play, he would have left Pittsburgh with a deal. They would not have let him walk out the door unless they were like, unless they were sitting there saying like, hey, Aaron, we absolutely need you. But I don't think that's what happened there. Because Rodgers would have been signed to a contract, they would have ended this whole thing, and we would now know that Aaron Rodgers is the Steelers quarterback, and he still might be. I'm not saying that he's not going to be. They definitely want him, which is why they're entertaining all this, and they have a price that they've set out for him. But if they were willing to pay him what I think he thinks that he wants for himself, he would have signed this contract by now. And unless he just really loves attention, and that's what this is all about, I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, even though there's a lot of history to show that he kind of is about that. But I'm going to give Aaron Rodgers the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's just the Steelers haven't given him the number that he really wants in a contract. So now Rodgers is still being considered officially by the Giants, though there were reports saying that maybe that's lessening more and more as time goes on. They signed Jameis Winston. There's also reports that he's actually not out of the running with the Minnesota Vikings just yet either. There were some reports saying that, and national insiders saying that, like, hey, the Vikings have indicated they're not going gun-ho for Aaron Rodgers, but they're not giving up on J.J. McCarthy. But then there were some people that said, oh, they're not exactly out on Aaron Rodgers either. So who knows where things actually go there. There's a lot of national insiders who still think Rodgers is going to end up with the Steelers in the long run. And to me, that makes sense for Aaron Rodgers. Like, if I'm Aaron Rodgers and the Vikings don't want me, I'm 41. I'm trying to live out my best last year, maybe two at best, if it's going to be anything, whatever it is. Why would you be on a team that's not going to give you a competitive chance? When he joined the Jets were an up-and-coming team that looked like they were a quarterback away from being a real contender in the NFL. Now he's going, if he joins the Giants, it's going to be an even worse situation than that because they have so much rebuilding to do. Now, the Vikings would make sense. He'd have Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson, one of the best wide receiver duos in the NFL. He'd have a good offensive line. He'd have playmakers. He'd have a defense. Like that would make a lot of sense. The Vikings looked like they were a QB away last year as well. But if he chose the Steelers, they're not what the Vikings were last year, but they are a playoff team. And again, they've been they can consistently get to the playoffs. So if you're Aaron Rodgers, you're looking for a fit, the Steelers actually would make a lot of sense there. So that's why I think there's a lot of links to the Steelers obviously want Aaron Rodgers, but want him at a certain price. And Aaron Rodgers, I think he's entertaining this because he thinks that the Steelers might be one of his best options, might be the best option right now. But I think Aaron Rodgers is also trying to get somebody to come up and actually pay him what he thinks he's worth. Now, I don't know if that's the $45 million a year deal that Mike Florio put out there, that supposedly, Aaron Rodgers' agent told him or whatever. But to me, when I hear that number, I think that's not anything near where the Steelers are offering. And I think the Steelers have a number. They're like, hey, Aaron, this is the facility. This is what you'll be able to work with. You're going to have these receivers. You're going to have this tight end. We're developing a line. This is what's going to be. But this is the number, and it's not moving. And if you don't take it, that is what it is. Personally, I think that the Steelers shouldn't be bothering with Rodgers. That's just my personal opinion. I've been saying it for a while. You can look at how Rodgers handled things with the Jets. He didn't show up for OTAs and mandatory minicamp, and there were questions. There was all sorts of drama. He was supposed to be a leader. He didn't look like a leader early on. It caused drama within the team. And even if he does promise Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin and Art Rooney that he's going to do that when he sits down with them and signs this contract, unless it's written into the contract that he has to do these things, how can they trust that he's going to do that, considering what he's done in the past? And another thing that we understand that Arthur Smith had a problem with Russell Wilson about was he had a problem with Russell Wilson adjusting plays and calling audibles and calling hot routes that weren't designed and things, and doing things that he didn't like. How is he going to react when Aaron Rodgers just does whatever he wants? Because that's what he's always done. You look at Aaron Rodgers in his history, he got the Jets to sign all sorts of receivers that he wanted. You think he's not going to try to just change your plays? He probably won't get the same run of the Steelers organization. Like, they're probably not going to be signing Alan Lazard or whoever's, to big contracts that hold them back a whole lot. But I could see him, like, who's to stop him on the play? Okay, hey, you know what, Calvin Austin, run the streak here. I think I see something here, and Arthur Smith is going to lose it. So for the very thing that they're saying they don't want Russell Wilson for, I think Aaron Rodgers does that tenfold. So there's that. Rodgers is known for wanting those things. It's hard to see that working for the Steelers with what they're trying to do right now. And I truly believe that, again, I think at the end of the day, the Steelers are still just biding their time, because their next big move is going to be the 2026 NFL draft, when they trade up and go get a quarterback in what is, I think, what I anticipate to be a much better quarterback class than there is this year. But the bottom line for the Steelers and the potential of them getting Aaron Rodgers, at least in my book and what I'm looking at, is that this is a situation where the Steelers are not going to be destroyed and bummed out if he doesn't pick them, which is why they're not jumping. They have their offer in. It's this offer. I'm going to estimate 20 to 25 million. I don't know. When I said 15 million about Justin Fields, people thought I was crazy. Turned out that was the number that they offered him. So, but I was saying, like, they're probably keeping the number down. Just to bring in Aaron Rodgers. They probably want, hey, 1 year of this could work. Let's just see what happens. It's a veteran who comes in. Maybe some things can click. Maybe there could be something there on the offense. That I can see where their vision is there. The question will be, does Aaron Rodgers want to go with that? And if he doesn't, where do they go from there? But I think the bottom line is, again, the Steelers, this whole quarterback situation this year is a rental. Like, whatever happens this year, this is not like Aaron Rodgers is not coming to the Steelers to reshape the offense and his image and make it so that he's the leader moving forward that passes down whatever he teaches to the next franchise guy. I'm not even sure if Aaron Rodgers is going to sign a 2-year deal with the Steelers. They might be looking at, hey, 1-year deal situation, and we'll deal with that, because they have Mason Rudolph signed for 2 years. And I think what the Steelers might actually be planning to do right now is they might be planning to get their quarterback next year, but they also, I think, might be planning to get a quarterback this year in the draft, even though I'm telling you, I don't think this is the quarterback draft year. I don't think this is the year to go try to get your starter, your franchise guy. But I do think this is a year that you could go get a future backup, a guy that can be a depth quarterback for you for the long run, kind of the way Mason Rudolph has been for the past several years. And that could still have value as you move forward. And that's something I think the Steelers will end up doing. And I want to talk about who their options are. And I actually did my first quarterback rankings of this class in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette as part of a Sunday feature. And I'm going to go over those rankings with you and why I think the primary plan for the Steelers at quarterback in this draft class is to find the backup that maybe they can develop into a starter, or maybe is just the next Mason Rudolph for the next years, helping with bridges and helping in pinches moving forward, a guy that they can have for cheap for the next 4 years on a rookie contract. We'll go over those rankings and talk about that possibility next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by Monarch Money. If you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and actually start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. We're also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the number one sportsbook in America. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the best chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. And remember, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. Again, new customers to FanDuel Sportsbook get $200 in bonus bets when they hit on their first bet of $5 or more when you sign up at FanDuel.com. Download the app today and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our episode here talking primarily about the quarterback position because we talked about Aaron Rodgers and that saga and where I think that stands right now. I think, again, the Steelers, they'll sign Aaron Rodgers if he'll agree to the deal that they offered him. If they don't, they'll move on. And I think they'll try to find something else, just another cheap veteran. I don't think that they're planning to try to do a whole lot with the quarterback position. Even if it is Aaron Rodgers, I think they're going to tell Aaron Rodgers to conform to this idea that hey, this is going to be a team that wants to run the football, that wants to play good defense, and to kind of play to the system that they have. Now, will that work with Aaron Rodgers? Who knows? Because he's Aaron Rodgers and he has a history of doing what he wants. But again, even if that does work out, I think one thing that the Steelers will do is draft a quarterback in this draft class. Now, this is not to say they're going to trade up and get Cam Ward. This is not to say they're going to trade up and get Shedeur Sanders, or that they're going to take Jackson Dart in the first round. And in fact, I'll break down what I think of this class right here in this segment. Now, again, I wrote a Sunday feature for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. That was actually my first Sunday feature as a full-time Steelers beat writer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. You can check it out. Steelers need a young quarterback. Here's how the 2025 NFL draft class meets their needs. That published this Sunday. You can check it out at post-gazette.com for my full breakdown. But we'll go over some points that some sort of bullet points here that I want to point out here. In breaking this down. But the bottom line for this year's quarterback draft class is that this isn't the year that you should go hunting for the franchise quarterback. I think this is the year that you could go and you can find a legit backup quarterback and actually find value in getting that kind of a guy, because there are several guys, I think, of that caliber that can be gotten in the middle rounds without trying to spend too much to get them. Because again, the Steelers aren't a complete roster yet. They're not just a quarterback away from being a real contender. They still need other building blocks, which is why D-tackle, I think, is a priority. They could still get a running back. They could still get a receiver. They could still get a whole lot of other options. We'll go over those in our mock draft Monday winner in the next segment. But the bottom line is that if they're going to get a quarterback, they need to do it in the middle rounds, and that means finding a guy that's probably going to be a backup. So, what I did was I ranked the quarterbacks by where I thought they were in this draft class, and then put tags on them and saying, hey, where do I expect them to go? What's it going to take to get these guys? So in my ranking of the quarterbacks, I made Cam Ward my top option. I think he's QB1 by 1,000%, and he's going to be gone right away. I expect him to be the first, second, third overall pick at the lowest. I don't see the Steelers trading up to do that this year because it's going to take a lot of capital to move that, and they still have a lot of things to shore up on their roster. So that's, and I think there's going to be teams that just kind of settle into that. That he's going to be their guy in this draft class. Now, the second option on this draft class, in my opinion, is Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado, of course, Deion Sanders' son. There's a chance that he could go very early in this draft class because some people think really highly of him. I'm not really, I don't think that he's someone the Steelers should trade up for. I also am not sure if he's someone they should pick at 21st overall if he falls there, particularly because when I watch his game, he has great accuracy. His fundamentals are there, and that's probably his biggest positive because his throwing motion is so repetitive. It's so concise. He's very accurate with that, and he has good footwork. But he lacks an elite arm strength. He lacks elite speed. And those are limitations that I think a lot of people rightfully worry. Could that lead to him not transferring to the NFL and becoming a playmaker there? Now, maybe it won't. Maybe he'll just be such a great decision maker that he'll make up for those types of things. Who knows? But as far as the traits that I look for in quarterbacks coming to the NFL, he doesn't have those things on his side. And in fact, there's the one thing that I think they get that's his biggest knock on him is he holds on to the ball too long. And when he does, and he's not processing what's going on, oftentimes he'll reverse spin out of the pocket to try to buy more time in college. That's something that we've seen happen in Pittsburgh when Kenny Pickett used to do that a lot. And that was something that he struggled with. That's not a good thing. And I think I see a little bit of deja vu if the Steelers go with one of these quarterbacks that's not named Cam Ward at 21st overall, because again, Cam Ward's not going to fall there. So I don't think that that Shedeur Sanders is the answer there at 21. Maybe he proves me wrong. I just don't see that happening. So with those two quarterbacks out of the way, let's look at the next options. Now, a lot of people are really high on Jackson Dart and even think Jackson Dart should be the Steelers' option at 21 if he's there. There's some people that really believe in him and think that he's the guy. I see him as a day 2, maybe even a day three option, to be honest. He has NFL tools, and there are examples of him making really good progressions. You've seen Dan Orlovsky put some tape out there, but there's also plenty of tape that you can put out there where he doesn't make good progressions, and he gets fooled by the defense, and he has bad technique, and he has a lot of things he has to put together to become a consistently good NFL quarterback. He has the tools. I think he has the tools, and I think that's what excites people, is that when he puts it all together, it's really exciting. Problem is he didn't put it together enough, in my opinion, to make him a guy that the Steelers should be even considering in the first round. Maybe the third round is where they would look in that situation. So despite all the mocks that are starting to put him more and more with the Steelers every week, I just don't see it. So, but he is my number 3 quarterback in this draft class. My number 4 quarterback, though, is Jalen Milroe out of Alabama. While he is a big raw project, he is not polished in any way, shape, or form. His 4.37 time in the 40-yard dash turned a lot of heads and reminded people how athletic he is as a runner. And while he'd be on a rookie deal, if the Steelers were to draft him in, say, the 3rd or the 4th round, he could grow in their offense, be a fallback plan if the 2026 quarterback plan doesn't work out, be something you develop. He could also be that change of pace quarterback that you just throw in there for Wildcat or whatever you want to do moving forward. And he could be a guy that if you develop, you can say, hey, that's our young athletic quarterback that's on the roster for the next 4 years, so that in 3 years' time, if you've drafted your guy, you have his backup, you have your young quarterback that you prefer, and that gives you 2 young quarterbacks in the room. I could see something like that working there, which is why I think Jalen Milroe, I think if I were to rank him as far as with the other prospects as how good they are as far as the total things, I think I would put him as a 4th round type of pick. But I think because of the quarterback position and how excited people are going to be to try to get a guy like him with his athleticism, he might need to be taken in the 3rd round for that to happen there. So that's I could see him being a guy there. But my top day 3 quarterbacks, once you get past Dart and Milroe, because to me those are the only really day 2 quarterbacks in this draft class that I think are there. I really like Will Howard out of Ohio State. I've talked about him a lot. Tyler Shuck out of Louisville. I don't see him as a day 2. I know there's a lot of people that really love him and his moxie and everything. I think that he's got the injury concerns. He's got holes in his game. I think he'd be a fine day 3, like 4th round, pick him up, stash him on your bench to see how he develops in camp and makes things work. But I think Will Howard, Tyler Shuck, Quinn Ewers out of Texas, Riley Leonard out of Notre Dame, Kyle McCord out of Syracuse, Curtis Rourke out of Indiana, and Max Brosmer out of Minnesota, who Nick Farabaugh talked about with us last week. All those guys, fine day 3 picks. I think that would be something there. Now, Will Howard is a guy that I think that if they got him in the 4th round, I think that would be a nice little sweet spot for the Steelers to get his guy, because Howard did build his big playability off his playoff resume, but he has the size and the skills in this draft that I could see him being kind of like a Mason Rudolph for the Steelers moving down the line. I don't think Will Howard's got the juice to be a starter, but I think he can be a career backup for the Steelers, which, again, there is value in getting those guys. When the Steelers drafted Mason Rudolph, they got a guy who's now coming back to them, and he is a veteran backup quarterback who can start for you at a pinch and help you get through some rough days. So if Will Howard can be that, I think that's a good thing. Now, Tyler Shuck, I think he brings decent experience and decent moxie, but I don't like his injury history. I think he also has a lack of consistency that holds him back. I mean, I don't think he has elite traits. I think he has solid traits. But again, I think he's a fine backup quarterback option there. And there's no denying that. I think that when you look at all these guys here, though, when I talk about Milroe, when I talk about Howard, when I talk about Shuck, and then some people that really like Riley Leonard because he's a dual threat quarterback, and I can see that there. There's some people that really like Kyle McCord. I think the bottom line is that this class, the strength of this class, are the backup quarterbacks. It's not that these guys are going to become starters. I think it's that there are several guys that project as like, hey, if you drafted this guy in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, he could be a solid backup quarterback for you where he comes in a pinch. Maybe you develop into a starter someday. But the bottom line is if you can just be a guy that just is on the bench, coming off the bench to help, when the starter gets hurt or is suspended or whatever happens there, that you can have guys like that. I think there's at least 4 or 5 guys the Steelers would be happy to have that would fit that caliber. And I think, honestly, Jackson Dart, I think, is kind of along those lines. I know some people really want to push him as a starter. I don't see that. I don't see that with Jalen Milroe. I think that those guys all qualify that, but I think that's the strength of this quarterback draft class. Whereas this isn't a good quarterback draft class, and this isn't one that I would look for a starter in. I do think that there are a lot of backup quality backup options who could work out in the NFL in that capacity. So that's why I think the Steelers should be looking at quarterback, but in those middle to late rounds where they can get one of those guys who can maybe be a Mason Rudolph, kind of like how Mason Rudolph was for the Steelers when they drafted in the 3rd round in 2018. So that's where I think about that. And again, I break that down in my person. If you want to read all my breakdowns of those players, again, check out post-gazette.com. Look up my latest article there. It published Sunday morning where we broke things down. I think the sweet spot for the Steelers, 3rd, 4th round for one of those quarterbacks, Jalen Milroe. If Jackson Dart's still around, great. Will Howard. Any one of those 3 guys, I think, would be winners. So with that being said, we got to get to Mock Draft Monday. That's next. You all submitted. I got hundreds of mock drafts this weekend because we actually put it out on time for once. So we were happy to do that. But we got to get to our mock draft winner and break down your picks right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our show today, and it's time to get to Mock Draft Monday. Now, as usual, we always finish our Monday show with Mock Draft Monday, our segment where we review the hundreds of mock drafts that you guys send us every weekend when we do this. Submit it on Twitter, the Locked On Steelers Facebook group, or on Blue Sky. Whenever I make those posts, just post a screenshot of your picks. If you ever have a trade, make sure to include that in there, and we like to go over those options. And this week's one rule that we well, first of all, I want to say thanks to everyone who always participates in this. It's amazing to see that this many people care to just submit mock drafts and then talk about, oh, I like this, and then y'all even interact with each other. I think that's a really cool thing. It's a fun thing. It's part of the fun of the draft process is all the limitless possibilities of what the Steelers or what other teams could do to build things forward. So it's amazing to see so many people paying attention to that and paying attention to our show and wanting to contribute to the content on our show with the mock drafts and looking at the best options there. So this week's one rule that we had, because I knew I was going to talk about quarterbacks, and I wanted to go over the backup quarterback thing and why I think that's the best spot for the Steelers to get a quarterback in this draft class. My one rule was you had to draft a quarterback before the 6th round of the draft, because to me, that's the cutoff of where I think that they could get a solid guy in that respect. And I knew that we were going to talk about it. So that led to that. And a lot of you guys did follow that rule. Thank you so much for doing that. So without further ado, this week's winner was Greg, aka Steel _Logic 412 with his picks there. Greg followed the rules, and I think he kind of did it in a slick way here. So Greg did a great job hitting on the Steelers' needs while pulling off a trade back and getting that backup quarterback. So first, Greg traded back in the first round, something we talked about a lot last week. I still think that there's a sweet spot for the Steelers to do that if Kenneth Grant isn't available at 17th overall. To me, he is the second best defensive tackle in this class. If he falls to 17, you sprint to the podium, you draft that guy, and you move on, and you figure everything else after that. But if he's gone in that situation, you could get the third best defensive tackle in this class, and that's Derek Harmon. Now, here's the thing. A lot of the draft rankers and things like that, I see a lot of them putting Derek Harmon as a guy that ranks, towards the 30s, where he could be a late first or an early second round pick. So if you're the Steelers and you're using one of these, if this plays out that way, as how a lot of these simulators are looking at, you could trade back and still get Derek Harmon and recoup a day 2 pick that you lost in the DK Metcalf trade. And that's exactly what Greg did. He picks up a 3rd round from the Chiefs, moving back from 21 to 31 in the first round. That 3rd round pick is the 66th overall pick. With his 1st round pick at 31st overall, he selects Derek Harmon, the defensive tackle out of Oregon. If you're unfamiliar, we've talked about him a lot on this show. Derek Harmon is a Cam Hayward-like built defensive lineman. He idolizes Cam Hayward and Chris Jones. I liked his demeanor. We talked to him at the Combine. We played his clips from the Combine on this show before. I think that this would be a really good pick for the Steelers in the first round. Be a big need, a really good prospect that I see in this class, the 3rd best defensive lineman in my eyes, interior defensive lineman in my eyes of this draft class. And I think that meets a lot of priorities for the Steelers there. So then, because he has 2 third-round picks now, that's where he gets busy, and Greg went and got his backup quarterback, Jalen Milroe. Now, I like Milroe in the middle rounds because this is where I think that he can find his value, especially if he's a backup quarterback with speed, not expected to start right now. I do think, though, because that Jalen Milroe really impressed at his pro day when he ran a 4.37 time in the 40-yard dash last week, more teams might be in on him than before, because his Senior Bowl was pretty rough, and I think a lot of people were backing off of him. But the Steelers, I think, still see him as like hey, if we get this guy in the middle rounds, maybe he could be something. Maybe he could be something that we work on, a project that develops over the long term, or just being an athletic backup quarterback. You can always use something like that on your roster. So I think the Steelers would want to get him before he gets too late and he comes off the market. And they might actually pick him in the 3rd round. This kind of goes along with my theory of how the 2022 NFL draft worked. I still maintain this theory that had the Steelers not selected Kenny Pickett in the 1st round, because I think that they thought he wouldn't be available by the time that they picked at 20th overall in that draft class, I think they would have taken, with that 1st round pick, a different player that wasn't a quarterback, like a Tyree Smith, an offensive tackle along those lines. They would have started the O-line rebuild back then. I think they would have picked Malik Willis, but probably not until the 3rd round, because I think that they wanted a backup quarterback with potential. And I think that there's a lot of, you look at Malik Willis and you look at, the physical measurements, there's a lot of similarities between him and Jalen Milroe, not like identical things, but, athletic, big arm, needs to put it very, very raw, a lot of things to put together. And I like the idea of them getting one of these types of guys in the 3rd round. You're not spending a whole lot on them. Contract-wise, that's really cheap, and you have a guy in your system for the next 4 years that can either develop into a starter if you want, or he can just be that system backup that is just on your roster. And you always know that there's injuries are going to happen. Some days you need those quarterbacks on a rainy day. So I like Milroe with the 3rd round pick at 66th overall that Greg traded to get from the Chiefs to get when he traded back in the 1st round. So then But then Greg gets a second third-round pick, the Steelers' natural third-round pick, and he goes running back with DJ Giddens out of Kansas State. Giddens, I like as a prospect. He's not one of my top running backs, but he ran a 4.43 time in the 40-yard dash. That's really good speed. When you look at his tape, I haven't studied him exclusively. I haven't spent a whole lot of time on him, but when I study his tape, I see good vision. I see patience. And one thing I noticed when I was looking over his numbers, he rarely fumbled. Like, that's another thing that I think the Steelers really want to get, is because that's, if nothing else, Najee Harris was consistent at protecting the football, and that's something that the Steelers are going to absolutely love. So if I'm looking at a DJ Giddens, that makes a lot of sense right there. I think that would be a really interesting fit with Jalen Warren. He's got some speed, he's got good vision, he protects the football. All those things sort of add up there. So with that third round pick, that makes sense. Then getting to the fourth round, Greg went back to defensive tackle, taking JJ Pegues out of Ole Miss, a solid defensive line pick. We talked to him at the combine. I like him. I like the cut of his jib. I think that he could be a good depth defensive lineman moving forward that helps them solidify the line. I think that's a really good sign right there. And so good job on Greg doubling down on the defensive tackle position in a time that I think that they need to double down, because they've signed some guys here in the later part of free agency, but I'm not convinced that those guys are going to be the guys. And so getting these two guys here while getting your quarterback and your running back in the third round, I think that's a solid way of adding guys to your team that can contribute sooner rather than later. Then he finished out with wide receiver, tackle, and safety. The wide receiver was Isaac Tesla. I actually don't know how to say that name. Out of Arkansas. Offensive tackle Logan Brown out of Kansas. And safety Craig Woodson out of Cal. All in all, I think Greg does a good job with these picks, getting the Steelers' needs, trading back to get more value, and then getting that backup quarterback at a decent spot, and also nabbing other good talent along the way. So good job to you, Greg. Congratulations on winning Mock Draft Monday for this week on March 24th. I hope you're bragging about it to your friends at work and getting to enjoy the talk there. And again, I think that's the bottom line here, though. The Steelers still have a big need at defensive line, and it's a great fit for what this draft's strengths are. But they also have a need at finding a young backup quarterback, a guy that can be on their roster for the long term, maybe make them so that they don't need to have to sign Mason Rudolph at the end of this current 2-year deal. And that's also where I think a strength is in this class. It's not a strength of the quarterback position in general, but it's a strength of, if you can get a backup, if you want a backup quarterback, a guy that's not going to take a whole lot of draft capital to get, I think this is a year that you could go do something like that. So with that being said, we bring our Monday show to a close. Thanks so much for tuning into the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, all the social medias, same handle everywhere, at Carter Critiques. Read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com, where I do all Steelers work now, and I did, again, my breakdown on this quarterback draft class and on Sunday, so go to post-gazette.com for that. And find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, breaking down your Pittsburgh Steelers on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed, subscribe to this channel to get all of those daily Monday through Friday episodes. We're back here tomorrow with more on your Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.